There's two different levels of property management services. One is only receiving the tenant placement part of property management. And that includes all of those services that we do up front in order to find a good quality tenant, get them under lease, and then get them in the property, and then we're done with our property management services for that particular owner. The ongoing property management services is the second level of services, and that's when we're engaged with that owner throughout the tenancy, throughout the lease. Okay, so we'll talk about what services and what activities we actually do on both of those levels, and then at the very end we'll talk briefly about the different charges that are associated with each one of those services. Okay, and I followed very roughly the outline that I gave you. I'm a realtor just like people that sell property. So I'm a member of the MLS. We have the power of the MLS behind us, right? And so I use that power that we have, and all of those agents in Northeast Florida, I don't know, there's probably 4 or 5 grand of agents in Northeast Florida right now can work on our behalf when we actually list that property and make it available for rental. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take quality pictures. We're going to get that property up on the MLS, and it's going to feed out to all of those secondary websites that you're used to with sales, and actually even some different ones that are just specific to rental services. So we're going to have a great presence on the web, because just like buyers, tenants are all going to websites in order to find the properties that they want to rent, right? And so we want to make sure our presence is very high there. I'd say well over 90% of the leads that we're going to get are going to be from websites presence. So we're going to get that fed out to all those secondary websites, but there's a few websites that aren't available through the IDX system because he actually got manually post them to that website. And so we're going to go out of our way to do that for the owner. One of those is going to be Craigslist. And so as long as the owner doesn't object to Craigslist, we're going to manually post it, and we're going to update it so that we're at the top of the pool. Now, it's a horrible search engine, it really is. But people still go there all the time, and probably even more so for rental than for sales. And even if the owner is hesitant towards posting it at Craigslist, it's really kind of in their advantage, even if they're kind of spooked by it, because when people do fraudulent activity on Craigslist, they'll take it from Zillow, where we're going to be posted, and they'll post it on Craigslist, of course, for a lower amount than what the market is, in hopes of creating fraud. And so for already posting on Craigslist, we're already checking that address to make sure that somebody hasn't done that to our owner, right? And if they have, then we're flagging it when we post it and update it. So it helps us watch Craigslist a little bit better. So we really like to have the Craigslist posting besides all of the thousands and thousands of websites that we've already posted through the IDX system. We're going to post it to a military website, AHRN, that's a manually posting. And just because we have found that, because we're a great military town, it creates a lot of incoming military gals and guys, and they'll go to that branded website in order to look for rentals. Because they feel that those that have a presence at that website are going to be more sensitive towards the military situation, okay? And so we want to make sure that we manually post it there. So, the name of the game is to attract as much attention for that rental as possible, because to a certain point, it's going to be a numbers game. If you have 100 people interested in that rental as opposed to 20 people interested in that rental, you're more likely to get the better quality candidate out of 100 people as opposed to the 20 people. So we want to create as much interest as possible so that we can kind of take the cream of the crop, right, out of having more numbers. We are going to make sure that there's going to be quality signage at the property. will have, as long as, HOAs or condo associations allow us to do that. If they have specific sign requirements, we'll make sure that we meet those sign requirements so that the neighbors can see that that is a rental that's available. And it does happen. Sometimes a neighbor wants their friend to live in that community, and we get a call from the neighbor. So we want to make sure that there's a presence actually in front of the property. And it's going to be quality signage. I mean, it's going to be something that they can actually see as long as it's allowed by the HOA. We do get calls off of signs all the time, especially in high traffic areas. The only lockbox that I use is the NEFAR lockbox, which is the electronic blue box, super box. And that really separates me out from my competition. That's important to me because most of my owners are owners that are concerned about the security of their property. The non-standard lockbox are those lockboxes that you could, pass codes on from person to person. I'm a realtor. I know when I talk to other realtors that sometimes I catch them and they're driving down the road and they tell me the lockbox number and they have not confirmed I am who I am. Okay, I know those non-standard lockboxes that you could pick up at Lowe's for $30 are lockboxes that you can YouTube to see how you could pick that lockbox and actually pick it fairly easy, or the numbers don't get turned after you're done. Well, we want to make sure that that property is actually secured, and that NEFAR lockbox, as you know, will capture the information of the realtor that actually pops it by their electronic key. So we know when they've actually entered in the property. Actually, I get an email, because I attach it to the property, I get an email as soon as that lockbox is popped. And if it's popped and I don't know that person is supposed to be in that property, I could call that agent because I know who exactly popped that lockbox. As you know, we pay dearly for those keys. So only realtors have those electronic keys, and it limits it to a realtor. We have no unescorted visits in our property. That's another thing that separates us out from the competition. The recent wave has been that if you have a tenant that wants to be in the property, instead of the agent meeting them at the property and taking them through the home, that they'll actually pick up a key, go to the property themselves, open it up as the prospect, and show it themselves. You have to hope that they've locked up like they should have, and they bring the key back to the office. That is not something that we do here at Florida Homes at all. They'll always be escorted either by the realtor that's listing the property, such as myself, or by the agent that's working on the realtor side. And to me, that's very important, and almost to all of our owners, security is very important. So they'll always be escorted while they're walking through that property. One of the most probably important things to a owner, and one of the spookiest things to the owner, is, am I going to get a tenant that's a high quality tenant that pays on time and treats the property well? That they actually leave that property in good of a shape as when they took possession of it. And so our job in screening is very important. And especially with property management, I'm the one often here in order to take care of the problems. So it's in my best interest to find the best quality tenant. I want to find a good tenant because it makes my life a lot easier. So it is a goal that I share in common with all of our owners in trying to make sure that we screen and we know who we're placing in that property as best as we can. In order to predict the future, the best thing to do is to look at how they've conducted themselves in the past, right? And that is through the screening process. We want to make it as easy as possible for the tenants to be able to complete their application. So it's all website based. Occasionally we'll have somebody that's a little bit old fashioned. They want, they don't want to go to the website to do their application. That's fine. We could do it. I've had on occasions. It doesn't happen very often because most people like the convenience of being able to do an application at I get them at all hours, midnight, in the comfort of their own home. But sometimes they want to come into the office. We'll just sit down at the computer together and I'll talk them through it because, again, we want these applications. We want to make it as convenient and easy as possible because a good applicant is somebody that we really want to pursue. We want to get those applications in. So they'll go to our website, they'll complete the application, and then I'll give them a call if I haven't met them yet. Often I would have met them at the property, but if another agent has actually showed that prospect my rental, I'll give them a call. I'll do an interview over the phone to determine, if they sound like a good candidate. If there's any blemishes, then I'll give the owner a call. Or if there's dogs involved or pets, and the owner says, well, it's negotiable depending on, what kind of dog or pet, then I'll give them a call and I'll run past that information. So that by the time I collect that $45 from that tenant, which is our application fee at this time, and the tenant is the one that actually pays that, and again, they can pay that online, I've kind of run past anything that might be concerned, because there's no sense in collecting from a tenant $45 if there's already something that's been disclosed that's going to disqualify them. So we try to be very fair with the applicants. Once we have that application in hand and the pre-qualification process has been done and any blemishes have been approved based upon verbally what they have told us, we start the screening process. The screening process is verifying what they have said on their application to be accurate and true, and what they have verbally possibly told us to be accurate and true. And we do that in several ways. We do the typical credit report screening. We use TransUnion, so we don't hit all three credit reports, but we do get a credit report. It is a full report. It's not just the score. So we can see actually not only their credit score, we can see any kind of factors that are impacting the credit score in a negative way. And we could see what kind of debt's out there to a certain point, right? If they have car loans that are still out there in their name, it's going to be on their credit report. So we get a little bit feeling of income to debt ratio. Okay, so the other part of the screening that we're going to do is we're going to one of the most important parts actually that my competition rarely does, because I'm the one that would be getting the call if they were. If they're in a current rental, I'm going to call that landlord and have them fill out a landlord verification. And I know how often that is not done by my competitors, because I don't get those calls if I lose a tenant in one of my properties and they go to the other property. And so, but I'll tell you that especially with private landlords, you get into the corporate landlords like apartment complexes, they'll just basically fill out the form that we have and send it to us. Doesn't tell us a lot, but with private landlords that have been burnt, they'll talk. I mean, they want to talk about their experience. And, it has a whole list of questions that we ask them. Have they paid on time? Have there been any return checks? Did they fulfill their lease? Have you been in the property since they took tenancy? Does it look as good or if not better than when they occupied the property? And that's a real important piece and gives owners probably one of the highest comfort levels that we can give the owners is the results of that interview that we have with the previous landlord. We're going to, we're going to do income verification, and that's usually done through pay stubs, the old-fashioned way. A lot of times it's electronic, so sometimes we'll go to websites with them and do a review on the website. 1099 self-employed people are kind of hard to do. Sometimes we look at the past year income tax forms that they have filled out, especially in a couple of months in the new year when people are doing their taxes. We might ask for that information because we know it's current. but we want to verify what they have told us to be their gross salary by some kind of supporting document, and if it's pay stubs for a couple of months. We do employment verification usually through the same process of looking at those supporting documents to verify that is where the money's actually coming from. We have to have a picture ID on every adult. And every adult does an application. So what we're trying to rule out is an 18-year-old, for example, that might be a sexual perpetrator, doesn't work, they're not supporting the lease, but they're going to be living at that property and being on the sex perp websites. Well, we still want to screen them, even though their credit score really doesn't matter to us. The criminal report's going to be important. So everybody, sometimes, mom that's, 70 years old and she's not working, we're still going to, screen grandma that's living there for the same reason. So we treat everybody the same, 18 years of age and up. They're all going to go through a screening process. And a lot of that is because of the last part of the screening that we do that's very important. And that is that criminal records check. We're going to do they check against 4 different bureaus. They're going to do a national criminal check. They're going to do a local criminal check. They're going to do a sexual perp check. And then the 4th that was just added due to the signs of the time is the terrorist watch check. Sometimes I even know if somebody has a heavy foot, actually, if they get a ticket. So we're going to gather all of that information together through that screening process. And we're going to then take it to the owner. And we're going to say, owner, this is how this person looks. And we'll go through a summary with that owner. The owner is always making the decision. And, one of the most important things that our owners want to know, and it's important to us too, is the owner is always in the driver's seat. We're not operating independently of the owner. And especially first with new accounts, our communication with the owners is going to be very intense. And so it is with the applications. We'll say this is their credit score, this is how, this is everything that we found out about this person based upon the screening process. What do you think, owner? And they'll often ask our opinion, and we'll give our opinion. We don't have any set designated cutoffs, okay, with our owners. I will say that I would probably fire an owner that wants to put a sexual predator in the property, because I don't want to be managing a property where every time I show up, the neighbors are throwing rocks at me because they have kids living next to a sexual predator. I haven't run into that before because none of my owners want sexual predators in their property, so we've been good. But, I have some owners, I've run into some owners that say, well, I'm okay with lower credit scores. I've been there, done that, I've turned myself around, I'll give somebody a chance. And so as long as that's coming from the owner, based upon how the credit looks and what's on that credit. And some things are spookier than others. If I have an eviction, that's kind of spooky. If I have a short sale, that's kind of spooky because that's housing, and that means that they weren't paying for that housing, and that's what I'm trying to provide. That might be seen as different from medical bills. Somebody that's went through a medical bout and now they're, have a lot of medical bills. So there can be different weight. The owners will know what's pulling down that credit, and they can make a decision based upon, their level of comfort, and definitely will give an opinion to how we think that person feels. But they're making the decision, up front. The communication is going to be there. We would never lease with a tenant without the decision being made by the owner to go ahead with that particular tenant after consultation. So that communication is going to be very important. Often I'll have the question, what about credit scores? How high should it be? And as I explained, there could be a range of reasons why credit scores are pulled down. Sometimes people don't exercise credit, and they'll say on there, they don't have enough revolving accounts. You got to exercise it in order to get the score. And that's kind of a lower score because they don't use credit can be seen as differently than a lower score because they have misused credit. Roughly, 640 is kind of like what I like, because I know with the FHA loan they could get in, we have owners that want to be in the 700s. We have other owners, like I said, that are more flexible and will be okay in the high 500s. But, for myself, in my opinion, the 640s are kind of what we're at least looking for. And so once the owner has decided to give us approval to proceed with leasing with that tenant, we'll go to the leasing part. We use leases that are in Florida Associations of Realtors leases. They're used throughout Florida. They've been checked out to be consistent with the Tenant in Florida Act, so that we know that our leases are good in Florida. We will work with owners that provide their own lease. That's fine. I just always want to make sure that it's clear that how Florida law is that if we work with the owner's lease and Florida statute conflicts with the lease that the owner has given us to use, Florida statute is going to override their lease should it go in front of a judge. Okay, so they can't create a lease that is different from actually what law says the tenant or the landlord can do in Florida. So it always will override it, and we know that the lease that we provide is going to be consistent with what the law says. But we can use a lease that the owner feels comfortable with as well, or we could use one of ours. We'll execute that lease, which means that all signatures will be on it. And if we're just doing the tenant placement services, our job has been done at that point. Okay, so that first level of service after the lease is executed, the owner has a copy of the lease, tenant has a copy of the lease. The owner will take over from that point on, move the tenant in the property, and do ongoing management services to the property and dealing with any tenant relationship issues that come up during the tenancy. But most of our owners will want us to do ongoing property management services, meaning that our relationship doesn't end with the leasing part, but we're going to continue to manage anything that comes up with that tenant or with the property during the lease period of time. There's two major areas that we deal with, and that is tenant relations, which has to do with tenants paying rent. A lot of it has to do with getting the rent collected. And then the other thing has to do with the other major area will have to do with the repair issues that come up. So that's what we'll focus on. One of the things that you want to do is to make collection of rent as easy as possible. Our owners want to get paid, and they want to get paid on time. And so the easier you make it to collect that rent, the better off and happy everybody is. And so we're very much up to date with technology on rent collection. It's as easy as the tenant going to the website and being able to pay their rent online. They could pay it, they could trigger it from their account to pay on a monthly basis. So that they don't even have to think about it. Every month they'll create a draw. So they could do it the old-fashioned way. They could drop it off at one of our offices. They can mail it, a check at one of our offices. Personal checks are fine after they get moved in. We require upfront cashier's checks so that we're liquid before they get the keys. But we make it very easy for our tenants. And we make it easy for our owners too. We want to make sure that they get paid on time. It's not a hassle for them. So we have direct deposit arrangements with almost 95% of our owners. We'll get their proceeds by direct deposit. So once we collect that rent, we're able to turn it around in a couple days and actually pay the owners. Okay, which occurs on the 8th of each month is when we pay our owners. out their proceeds. So it's a no-brainer, very easy for everyone that's involved and very efficient. If there's any a lack of paying on time, then we serve the law-required 3-day notice in order to make sure that if the worst thing happens and we go to eviction, that we have met what's required in order to, as quickly as possible, so that we don't lose any vacancy days due to non-payment, or we limit our vacancy days due to non-payment. So most of our leases are set up with the 5-day grace period. Some of them are adjusted for less. I don't think we have any that go beyond 5 days. And so on the 6th day, with the tenants that aren't responding, we're going to the home, we're posting our 3-day notice, taking our picture as by law, so that we're ready for eviction with that tenant if we have to go to that phase after 5 days of non-collection. So we'll serve that first day's notice. But of course, rent collection is very important, because I'm, again, joined by the hip with my owners who want to be paid. I'm there too. I want to be paid too, right? So we don't charge our owners anything if we're not collecting rent. And so, you can believe that's a priority for us as well, to make sure that we're able to, that we are collecting rent so that everybody can be paid in the end and everybody can be happy. And if something happens, we want to make sure that those vacancy days of lost income to our owners are reduced as much as possible, and that's why we are very quick to drop on those 3-day notices. I'll do a 3-day notice on the 6th day with some tenants that say, well, I can't pay, today, but I get paid a couple days down the road, and we're already past the grace period. I'll show up and I'll say, I got to serve this, 3-day notice. I'll be a little bit softer with it because they're communicating with me. But if I don't serve that 3-day notice and something happens and they can't pay, on Friday like they thought they would be, then I haven't lost any vacancy days on behalf of my owners. One of the things to always remember with property management is that the owner is our principal. Tenants will often think we're working for them, okay? We're really not. We are, because they're writing out that check, right? Mm-hmm. So they're thinking, oh, you're working for me because I'm writing out the check. But the tenant is not paying us. The owner is paying us, okay? It's their property and they're paying us. So we're always working on behalf of the best interest of the owner. Not to mean that we're neglectful of the tenant, because they're an important part of the whole occupancy, property management arrangement, so that we can get paid. But you always have to remember that principal, who we're working for, is going to be that owner and their best interest. We will collect the security deposit. And if the owner wants to hold that security deposit, they're welcome to do so. The law says that it has to be in a Florida-based bank, and there are certain requirements for it. So the majority of our owners, sometimes we have investors that want to hold their own security deposit. Sometimes owners that have managed their property, but they want to start playing golf again and allow us to manage the property. That they're so they're used to doing it, and they might hold their own security deposit, and that's fine as long as the tenant is aware that the owner is actually the one holding the security deposit. They can. We hold it in a non-interest bearing account here in one of our escrow accounts if we're going to hold it. Probably about 80% of the time our owners are asking for us to hold the security deposit, and then we'll release it after the tenancy is over. When it comes to security deposit claims, one of the most important things that we are going to do with our owners in order to protect their interests is, prior to the move-in of that tenant into that property, we're going through the property and taking, I average probably 150 pictures. Okay, and they're really boring pictures. They're not your fascinating listing pictures. They're If I'm taking pictures of a room, it's a picture of the blinds, it's a picture of the window to show that there's no cracks, it's a picture of that wall showing that there's no scuffs and no holes in it, it's a picture of that light, it's a picture of the ceiling. I mean, I could go on and on. In this room, I would have maybe 30 pictures, 20 to 30 pictures. And we do that throughout the property. Those are the pictures prior to move-in, okay? About halfway through the tenancy, between the 5th and the 7th month, if I haven't been out at that property yet for some reason, like to check out a repair or something like that, we will go through the property and do a mid-lease inspection, okay, or property review. Don't take as many pictures at this stop because the tenant's personal belongings aren't in there. And it's going to make them uncomfortable, and I don't blame them. It's not necessary if everything looks good, okay? I'll take a picture of the outside, to prove that I was there, and if there's something wrong with that property, my camera's coming out and click, click, click. I'm not that concerned about getting their personal belongings in there if there's a big old hole in that wall, right? But as long as everything looks good, and then we'll do because we take less pictures, we'll do a written property review as well to be able to put in the file, showing that we were there. And then at the end of the tenancy, we will, and we do that about every 6 months. So if we're going in there and they're on a year lease, prior to redoing the lease, we'll do another property review if they're going to stay in the property. And then it's kind of on an every 6 month schedule, okay? And, it's, the property review sometimes it can be that we spotted a trampoline in the backyard. You can't see it from the front. Because if I'm in a neighborhood, driving through a neighborhood, and one of my properties are close by, I'm going to do a drive-by just to see if the outside looks decent. 'Cause that's easy enough to do. I could see if the grass is knee-high. I could see if the grass is, especially during summer, if they turned off the irrigation, you'll have grass burn up on you and thousands of dollars in resod. So I'll do drive-bys, without any notice. But the interior property reviews will be done every 6 months. Now, at the end of the tenancy, after they have moved out, we go in there again and do a full spread of interior pictures. And those are condition pictures. So we're going to have 150 to 200 pictures at the end of the tenancy. And as the old saying is, a picture says 1,000 words, right? I tell my owners this, I tell my tenants this. If I am dragged through court, I'm walking out a winner. I am going to do that because I'm going to have my act together enough in order to be able to show the judge we're withholding, for example, $500 for that hole in the wall. Here's the picture of the wall before they moved in. Nice, clean wall, no hole. Here's the picture of the wall after they moved out, big old hole in the wall. And here's the estimate of $500 from a vendor, and that's why we're withholding the security deposit. And so that's very important because tenants do have rights, and if you don't have your evidence, then you're going to walk out with that security deposit going back to the tenant, okay? It can't just be because the owner wants it, or the owner feels like they have a right to it. You're going to have to prove that the owner has a right to be able to claim that part of the security deposit. Florida has certain laws. The notice to claim a security deposit form has to be done. And so we're going to do that with the time frame that Florida gives, because if we don't do that, or if the owner doesn't do that, and the tenant does file a pushback with court saying that we claim that the owners claim that security deposit unrightfully so, and we can't produce that document, which is sent by certified letter to the last known address, then guess what? The judge is probably going to say, owner, where's that notice? First thing they say, we can't produce it, security deposit's going to go back to that tenant, Okay, so that's the first step, which is to notify the tenant that there is a pending claim on the security deposit. So it's kind of complicated, and that's part of what we're trying to do, again, to protect the owner's interest. We're trying to make sure that if there is any pushback with tenants, that we have all the evidence that we need in order to squash it. And I don't end up in court that often because of having that act together. I've had people call me, tenants call me and say, I don't agree with this. I shoot them off a couple pictures and the estimate, and I don't hear from them again. Okay, so it's an important part of what we're doing for our tenants. And those property reviews, while they're in occupancy, we're not necessarily claiming a security deposit. We catch things like a trampoline being in the backyard and the owner's homeowner's insurance policy is probably not going to cover it unless they have a special rider, right? And so we can deal with those issues. Cats in the house and there's no cat on the lease, or there's a litter box in the corner. You say, well, I don't remember a cat being on this lease. Why do we have a litter box here? Vicious breed dog, where when we place a tenant in the property, we get a picture of the dog, right? And we put that on file, and it's a little, cute little fuzzy looking thing. And then we walk in and we see a pit bull. It's not the same picture. So, there's lots of, the worst case scenario, they're cooking meth in the, bathtub. So those regular property reviews are important in order to discover problems that, you don't want to have go on. With owners, because we're doing rent collection and we're operating a trust account for each owner, transparency is very important in real time. That is their money, and they're agreeing to allow us to collect a fee off of what we collect, but that really is their trust account. Each tenant and owner gets an online portal. And so the owners can go online and actually see at any time if the tenant has paid 5 minutes ago, the owner can go into their portal and say, oh, I see my tenant paid. Okay, so it is very real time. It's very transparent. Often I have one owner that every month when I pay her out, she's got multiple properties with us. This is what she likes. This is what we do. She comes in, sits down, we go through the owner statement. She says, that's cool. She walks out, she has her check. And so, transparency in real time is what we will always present with our owners. One of the things that we're doing is dealing with repair issues. And so on every repair, we're going to get an invoice. The only vendors that we use are going to be licensed and insured vendors if we are the ones engaging the vendor with the repair. If an owner knows a vendor that they like, as long as it's clear that the owner has selected that vendor, but they're not on our vendor list, that's fine too. Because we can't vouch for them, we haven't vetted them, we just want to make sure that it's clear that this is the owner's selection should something happen, that the owner is okay with it. But if we send our people out, we're going to make sure that they have been vetted, which means they're legit people. If they get hurt on the property, they've shown us that they have the proper insurance, and it's not going to go back on my owner's insurance policy for their injury. And we've been able to maintain relationships over a period of time with our vendors. So we know them. We know, and I'm very honest about the rates with our vendors. They're not the cheapest. They're not going to be a mojo, meth addict. A few homes down the road coming in to change the locks on your property. They're going to be somebody that we've worked with a long time, that we know that when they change those locks, they're not coming back to your property and taking the fridge later. Okay, so they're honest vendors, and that means that they're going to get competitive rates. Okay, they're not going to be the dirt cheap rates that you're going to get by non-licensed vendors or uninsured vendors. But if they start itching up because they get really busy, and their business is taking off and they start getting out of range, then we're going to cut them off of our vendor list. Okay, because I've got to explain to the owner why a capacitor with heating and air, during the summer, capacitor. We know how much capacitors cost. So if capacitors, service calls start going out of range with our other vendors, because we'll have multiple vendors in each one of the trades, then we'll stop using the vendor that is going out of range, so that we're always kind of in that competitive range. We'll get an invoice on it. We'll confirm that the repair has been done. We'll upload that invoice as soon as it's done to the website, again, so that the owner can see it in real time. Often we're on site in order to, talk to the repair guy for your normal repair. That might not be needed, but we're going to verify that the repair is actually done before we actually pay the vendor. And the vendor's paid out of the owner proceeds, so it's very easy on behalf of the owner. Unless it's a major repair like a remodel or a renovation, where the owner might pay the vendor directly because the amount of the repair exceeds what we're actually able to collect through our rent, then we'll be making the payment directly from us to the vendor, so that it's easy on the owner. Just lost my train of thought. We'll do a 1099 at the end of the year for the owners that show how much revenue they've collected during that year. Okay, but the other thing that we'll do is we'll give them an income statement that actually shows all of the expenses that offset that revenue. So it's very easy at the year end for them to do their taxes. And that's, part of what we're trying to do for them is to make sure that if they're using somebody to do the taxes, they could take that income statement, give them the 1099, and boom, that's pretty much, it's ready to go. If they do their own taxes by one of those online tax services, it's, really easy for them to be able to just plug in that expense line item so that their revenue will be offset by their expenses. And we collect all of those expenses, of course, that we pay directly will be wrapped up in a single number for them. But they could also look through the year to see, they'll see itemized expenses so that they know if there's a pattern throughout the year. Well, we've had somebody out there 3 times for the heating and air, and it's a 15-year-old unit. What do I want to do, going forward? Do I want to make the decision that now's the time to switch it out? So it's a very detailed statement if that's what they want. If they're in a HOA community or a condo association, we'll make sure that the tenant is, and we're dealing with any kind of responses that need to be done in order to make sure we adhere to the bylaws of that community. We'll make sure that the lease ledger is correct and all up to date and really clean document. But if we actually go to the part that we're filing, eviction has to be filed through the court in order to get the tenant out of the property. And thank goodness it doesn't happen very often, but sometimes it does. Then we do use a professional attorney for that, and there's an additional fee for that service. And it depends on, it can range up to $500 if the tenant actually contests it. Usually they don't. If it's not contested, it's about $300 in additional service. The reason for that is, thank goodness I don't have to do evictions all the time. But if you don't have your T's crossed and your I's dotted, the judge will throw it out because that tenant has rights too. So everything has to be done right, or else if you get all the way to the point that you got it in front of the judge and it's not right, then he'll throw it out and you start the whole 3-day notice process over. You start everything over again, and you could lose out a month or two of rent because of it something that was lacking through the process. So I like to use an attorney that hammers that court docket every day. They know how to deal with it. They know those judges. They know how to work it through in order to reduce the vacancies days. Because again, I'm not getting paid if the owner's not getting paid. So it's very important for us to be able to make that change and to be able to get a tenant in there that can actually pay on time. So in summary, that's the services that we provide for the fee that we're going to be able to earn from our owners for property management services. The fee structure can vary from property manager to property manager, and it is negotiable. Okay. As you see on my marketing material, my fee structure is that for tenant placement services only, I'm going to charge them 1 full month's rent for that fee. So if it's a rent, our average rents are probably $1,200. Okay, so if it's a $1,200 lease, then the owner would owe me $1,200. Unless I negotiate it down, and between us here, it might have to do with how old the home is. If it's an older home, I spend a lot more time on it. If it's a newer home, I've got, it's great. Our market's, turning around. I do property management for investors out in California that are buying brand new homes again. It's like, wow, this, because that's what they used to do, right? Buy a brand new home, turn it into investment property immediately, brand spanking new, everything. Piece of cake to work with, right? You get a home up there in Riverside, that was built quite some time ago and everything's falling apart on you. I spend a lot more time with it, so I'm less likely to negotiate off of my price on something like that. A more desirable area. A quicker rental, I might negotiate off of my fee. If I have a referral fee that I got to pay for that owner referral that came to me, I got to count in there, the referral fee part. So you do some arithmetic. Realistic expectations with the owners. If the owner is saying, well, and it's the same thing like in sales. You have the same thing. You go in there and you say everything in the neighborhood is selling for $150, but their home is special, right? They don't have a $150 home. They have a $180 home, And so rents the same way. $1,200, you see $1,200, $1,200, but their home's special and they think it's $1,400. Well, if I'm going to take that on, I'm less likely to negotiate as deep down because I know I'm going to be running my butt up there showing that home a lot until the owner realizes that a price reduction needs to be done. I will say that with owners, with first-time landlord owners, one of the things we have to help them understand because they don't readily do this arithmetic is they're thinking about monthly, especially if they have a mortgage on it. You have somebody that has a mortgage payment of $1,150, and then they know that they're paying us a certain amount every month, and that drops it down. But the value of the property is only $1,200, but they're upside down every month. They're stuck on that monthly payment, right? But you have to help them understand that with leases, you're looking at the full year of the lease. So if you have vacancy days for 2 months because it's overpriced, until you find a tenant that will accept the higher price, but usually what happens is you have to lower it to the market value because it's the same thing like in sales. You got Zillow out there, right? You got these the tenants know what this property is worth. They do the same thing on the rentals websites of what the property's worth. So they know. They're not stupid. So you have to help them understand that those 2 months of vacancy days have killed the yearly return for them. And so it's better to take a competitive rental amount, reduce your vacancy days, because when you look at the yearly return, you're going to be better off reducing your vacancy days at a lower amount than you will be at a higher amount and losing out on that revenue. And often it's an investor, they get it. But private homeowners that have to relocate but they don't want to sell, sometimes that has to be kind of spelled out. So that's an important part to it. So we will, with ongoing property management services, to jump back to the fee schedule, the upfront fee of a full month's rent will be typically reduced at half of a full month's rent. Okay, I usually don't negotiate off of that very much. If I have a really high-end property, I might, but usually I'm pretty strict with, if it's a $1,200 property, I'm going to retain as soon as our agreement's going to say as soon as that lease is signed and we got a tenant coming in, we have a right to $600 off of that. And believe me, I earn every penny of that. So with property managers, it's efficiency. I started out in sales. I understand that sales part, but with property management, you'll see, you got to do everything efficient in order to survive and be able to live. And so $600 up front for all the work that you're going to do is really not covering the cost of your time. When you're doing it at 50% on most placements. Where you recover it is just like with your owners, you have to look over the lease period of time. It's the monthly collection of the service of each month, what you're able to collect from being involved with that property when they pay the rent. Typically, that monthly collection is going to be 10% of rent collected. So, because it's easy arithmetic, you got a rental at $1,000. We place the tenant in there. Owner owes us 50% or $500 of that. Okay, and then going forward, every time we collect rent, then our agreements are usually that we're able to collect 10% of that $1,000. So that'd be $100. Okay. So those are the two major fees. There's a lease renewal fee that I will charge, especially lower properties. That's the fee that when I'm sitting across the table and someone says, is there anything you can do about the fee structure? I'll drop off the lease renewal fee. That's the one that I'll usually tackle first. Lease renewals have become easier. It basically means that when a lease is expiring and we have to put a new lease in place because the same tenant is staying in that property, that they pay us $200 when we execute that lease. E-Sign has made it so much easier and more efficient. And actually $200 is on the low end of what my competitors are charging. So, but if I have to drop a fee, usually it's the lease renewal fee because I know I often can just do it, by E-Sign shuffle at that point. There's no move-in or anything like that. So you're looking at, for ongoing property management services, the fee structure being 50% of the equivalent of a full month's rent, 10% of rent collected thereafter, and $200 lease renewal fee. Very simple. No hidden cost. So I always tell my owners, this is it. If you're going to talk to other companies, please make sure that they disclose all costs associated with the service. My competitors, if I send a vendor out there to do a repair and that vendor invoice is $100, they'll charge you 10% on top of the vendor invoice. Okay, so make sure you understand what you're charging. I'm not going to surcharge you, okay, on top of the vendor array for sending the vendor out there. If another agent shows that property, my property, and I owe a co-op fee to that other agent, and they're not much, but let's say it's $140. Most of my competitors will have in their agreements that the owner actually pays an additional $140 to pay that other agent. I'm going to eat that. Okay, so it's simple and predictable. There's not going to be a lot of hidden costs associated with it. There should be no surprises. No surprises when it comes to cost.